And now the player is not null because we're able to log in. And the command is look, and the player instance. We can see it's populated. You got to dig way in if you want to get to the player name, but there it is, Gary. So our hive mind process strategy is where it should come next. So let's go ahead and dig into this guy. Okay, so we are debugging two things at once, and it makes it look like it's all the same application, but it's actually two different processes, and and one's talking to the other over TCP. So don't get confused. We're not in the same application. All right, so I get the console request. I grab the payload from that, and I cast it to console request, and then I do a get game response, and the command is look. And the player name is Gary. Let's do an F11 on that. Oh, so here's the bug. So, and I just happened to catch it out of the corner of my eye. Look is going to most likely map to look at, which is not what we want. Yeah, because we're doing that first string, which is look. And so our game action becomes look at. Let's just go ahead and see what else happens. And then we say we get the target. Well, there is no target. So that's what throws the exception. Alright, so let's go ahead and handle that. And we'll see the exception, things outside the bounds of the array. It ends up being, well, since we're catching it and we're throwing back this response, it ends up being kind of a black box to the user. It's like, oh, something went crazily wrong and it can't handle its business. So, and because this happens here, inside of the process strategy, and let's just go back over to our notepad. If nobody minds. If anybody has any questions, we'll keep that down there in case somebody has a question about it. So, the way this works is the client sends a request. And the server passes that request to the process strategy. At some point, that strategy passes it to our hive mind. And then at the end of our hive mind, we're making sure all the player stuff is set, right? So again, we're going back to this kind of chain of responsibility. So right now, because we never get here, and because we fail here, we're running that bug we're trying to fix where we get back a poorly formed game response. So this is another reason why the chain of responsibility is going to save us from all of this. Because what we want to have happen is that we want to have a chain of responsibility. Responsibility? Sure. Alright, so, and then we want that first step to do login and off. Then we want the second step to do process request. Process game request explicitly. And the first step we want to say finalize and return game response. And so the flexibility that we're going to get out of the chain of responsibility is that, let's say this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. we want to make sure that regardless of what happens before step 3, that step 3 fires off every time. So we might end up doing a 2A and a 2B and have all of these steps. And any one of these it could fail. We want to always make sure that the last thing that happens is we finalize everything and before sending it back to the user so we can prevent their client from crashing. And the chain responsibility, we could do this all in the same class. We could do it 1,000 different ways. The beauty of the design patterns is they don't rely on you being a genius, right? It's like just it's a well thought out and well beaten approach, and it's gonna keep paying dividends. So we want to be able to do all these things nearly in a vacuum and then just kind of compose them together as needed. So, and as we see places where it's going to come in handy, I'll point them out. But in the meantime, let's take a look at how we're going to fix some of this stuff, right? So, here, we say inspect. I want to change these two. So look at is inspect, and look around is just going to be look. So it's a cheap fix because hardening your business logic isn't always the best answer to proper exception handling. They're not one and the same thing. So we don't want to do we don't want to do hardening at the expense of. We want to do both. We want to both harden our business logic, and we also want to ship quality code. And quality code is going to have exception handling built into everything. So the other thing we need to do is what was actually throwing. The reason why we never got there was because everything here expects that there's going to be a target. So what we want to do here for the target, Strophium asks, what do you mean by business logic exactly? Cool. All right, I'm going to put that in my brain for a second, and then I'm going to talk about it. Oh, look at this. I got an easier way. Let's not break the convention. We're also already saying if args.length So if the length is equal to 1, so we only have that one argument, then we're just going to make the target null. Oh. I keep saying, as soon as I say something, I find a better way to do it. Alright, so let's see if this does it. It's not perfect, but it's consistent. And the first step is always just be consistent. If you're wrong, at least be consistently wrong. That's the easiest way to improve, because you can go back through and find that thread of wrongness and be less wrong. Alright, so business logic. Cool. So business logic is anything that wow, that's an excellent question. I don't want to make something up for you real fast. So let's look at the or domain logic. You might want to use domain logic. So the part of the program encodes the real-world business rules and determines how data can be treated. Yeah, I guess that's about as good as you're going to get. I don't want to wax academic on you. So business logic or domain logic is part of the program that encodes the real-world business rules. So I think that's the tricky part here is still going to be business. And so I definitely like the use of domain instead, right? So the domain logic. And let's take a look at what that means instead of our application. So this project, and let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and add a solution folder, and we'll say presentation. And inside of that, we're going to put our client. And then we're going to add another one called business logic. Although, let's go make it domain logic. And I'll try my best to use that phrasing from now on. So inside of that, we're going to throw our core. And let's make this 2. Okay, and we'll figure out some other stuff to for common and server. So, if I open up the presentation tier, the actual game client, and I go into a domain, and I go into game engine, I do expect to see everything I need to interpret the response from the game engine, to display the game engine elements, to talk to the game engine. But when it comes down to actually making decisions about commands, or there's got to be a better way to describe that. When it comes down to making any kind of decisions that are going to affect the game, that's what we call the business logic, right? So if you're on a website and you click a button and an error message pops up, we don't consider that business logic. We consider that part of the presentation tier, as part of the presentation markup. Within that world, it's definitely a form of logic, but we consider whatever you send to the server, whatever's in charge of processing the information you send, that thing is going to be our business logic. Great question, because only upon thinking about it do I realize you just kind of take the lexicon for granted, and even some of these definitions aren't great, and they're really fuzzy sometimes. Like they determine how data can be created, displayed, stored, and changed. That's kind of fuzzy. It's not always so cut and dry. Sometimes your presentation tier makes some decisions and delegates the things that are beyond it to the business logic. And sometimes things in your proxy tier do things. So we definitely expect the bulk of the decisions to be made in the business logic. So I wouldn't expect, for example, my command parser to be inside a presentation tier. I expect it to be in my core, because that's where it's centralized all of my algorithms that answer questions and solve problems. Alright, so we've got 2 little checks here that says if the argument length is greater than 2, meaning if somebody types in 3 words we just say, hey,